Can you all hear me well? Let's see. So, can you hear me? So if there's a chat or something like that, just tell me what's going on. So I'm going in the same vein as Krista, and what I'll do is give you, let's say, some vocabulary of what Krista was talking about, and some other examples to, let's say, reinforce what she said, and then show you some techniques. Okay. So the idea here is that scientific writing, it's about practice, about getting better, and it's about deliberate practice. Okay. So some of the ideas that Krista had was, okay, to write down your errors and then try not to repeat those errors. The question now, of course, is when do you know it's an error? And here what we hope to show is what those are. Okay. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit of the why and the how, but we're not going to talk a lot about that, because the why and the how is it's to better communicate, to become, get cited. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about discourse, the Aristotle and discourse, but what we've termed the word is style. So we've come up with a series of recognizing different forms of speech and then relating that to style. And then the other issue is meta-discourse. So it's talking about talking. And a lot of what Krista has shown is meta-discourse, okay? And so we're putting names to what these different words that she was talking about, okay? So this course, I'm a chemical engineer. I'm a professor at Polytechnique Montreal, and I've written a book and have traveled throughout Europe and North America, talking about deliberate practice, how to improve your writing. So I've been to Prague 2 years in a row to give a course at the Erasmus Plus. I was invited to Cambridge in Spain, Italy, Greece, Belgrade, and then in North America, Sandia National Labs, UBC, and people from all over the world have taken this lecture or a course where I have a 16-hour course. And you see that it's from all different languages. We recently had people from Sri Lanka, and some from English. And so what we're trying to do is show you basics, okay? So recognize why writing well is important is, let's say, one of the objectives. But what we're going to look at is precisely style, and it's distinguished between concise and redundant, precise and vague. Krista talked about active and passive voice, and then vigorous and feeble verbs, which she also talked about. And then we're going to try to reduce meta-discourse. And this is something that these two styles are related, okay? And then in the course, of course, we apply these to writing titles, abstracts, and the introduction, but we will not do that here. So John Maddox was the editor-in-chief of Nature for 20 years. And his last editorial, he said that the English language has become a casualty of the competition to publish. And he further says that do researchers deliberately write obscurely? Okay, it's just, can everyone see the presentation? Huh? This one. Okay. Okay. Okay, super. So now that's interesting that he's asked the question, do people actually write obscurely on purpose? Okay, that's a kind of a question that is like, why would you do that? And Krista mentioned it as well, because the bigger words are more sophisticated. But I think it goes beyond that. And Steven Pinker is a psychologist at Harvard, and he said that, quoted from 1961, said, "Grammar is a complete mystery to recent graduates." And then he went on to say that there was another article in 1917, and that was, "Our freshmen can't spell, can't punctuate." And these are talking about English speakers. And then we've got, let's say, 1785. "Our language is degenerating very fast." Okay. And then from there, it's like, how far does this go back? Well, in 1478, what was written was, "Our language and certainly our language now used varieth for which was used and spoken when I was born." The question is, how far back does this go? Okay, and it's 3000 BC. Sumerians' youth writing skills are deteriorating. And so what is this? It's that people that write well criticize people that don't write like them. And so what I'd like to emphasize is that writing is something that is progressing with time, as Krista showed. Chaucer with 82 or 60 word sentences, but it's also, as we write more, we understand better, and we write better. Okay, but with deliberate practice. So just to let's say emphasize the writing process. How much time does it take to write a paper? Okay, so here's a student, a PhD student. She writes a paper, and then you can see that she gets read, okay, from her supervisor. So she revises, and then she resubmits. And here's draft 2, which is again read. She revises again, this time a little bit more, with more emotion. And draft infinity is read, okay? And so what happens is she's very agitated, and finally the supervisor says, "I'm sick of reading this, just turn it in." Question is, how many times do you have to write a draft before it's ready for submission? So I've asked this question to a number of people, and I said it was 6 or 7. Pinker, for his books, it was 6. A friend of mine is the editor-in-chief of the AICHE Journal of Chemical Engineering. He says it's 17. Another, which is the editor of the Journal American Ceramics Society, he said it was 16. So the idea is that a draft, the first draft is the first step in a long process, okay? And what does a draft mean? Okay, the draft could be checking spelling, but it also is changing sections and looking at logic. So writing is a huge, long process, okay? The question is, how do you write? How do you get there? How do you get to the first draft? And in 65 AD, Marcus Fabius Quintianus said, Write quickly and you will never write well. Write well and you will soon write quickly. Well, what does that mean? What he's saying is, if you intend to write well from the beginning, you will write nothing. And so the writing process has to be spontaneous and fast. And so while you're writing, the question is, how many words per day is standard or acceptable, or what can you expect? So we had a professor here that just hired, and he was a science writer. And in fact, if he was paid to write 500 words a day. So that gives you an idea of, if you're writing 100 words, 2 paragraphs in one day, it's not a fail. It is not that you are unsuccessful. That is how much time it takes. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what I am targeting, what I aspire to when I write. Okay. So now we're going to talk about discourse, and this is something that we ignore sometimes, and that is, here are the Aristotelian images of discourse. So we have Rodin, the thinker, penseur. You have MIT, and then you have a picture I took in Burundi of the pygmies of Burundi. So in terms of, let's say, Aristotelian discourse, the thinker, of course, is logos. MIT is pathos, of ethos. And then, of course, here with the pygmies is pathos. So here, what we have to concentrate on are all 3 aspects when we're writing an article. So logos is the one that's obvious, that you have logic, reason, rationale, and proof. Okay. Why do we need ethos? Well, ethos has to do with your credibility, trust, and reputation. For example, somebody from MIT has more probability of getting accepted faster than somebody from Burundi. But together with credibility and logic, we also need to have pathos. And what is pathos? That is emotion and language, the why. Why are we doing this? Why is this interesting? And so all of these 3 aspects we have to bring to your article to make it interesting, and why would people read it, and why would a publisher accept to publish it? So I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that, but those 3, let's say, elements of discourse transcend your abstract, could be your title, and also your writing. Now, what happens is ethos is something hard to achieve, but easy to lose. And poor writing is one way to lose ethos. And if you have no ethos, if you have no credibility, then it's unlikely that you're going to be, your work will be accepted in a high impact factor journal. So with my sons, we came up with this idea of a shibboleth. A shibboleth is a secret word, a secret phrase where people recognize each other. And what we're trying to suggest is that let's get rid of the shibboleth when we're speaking, when we're writing, so that we communicate with simple language. And of course, shibboleth is not such a simple word. And so here is something my son came up with. It's the Balrog of the Lord of the Rings. And what we've got here is we're going to try to slay this beast, this shibboleth, with style. And the style, what is it? It's writing with concise, precise, active, and vigorous. So this is the point of this fight. What is clarity? You see, that's the interesting thing, is what is clarity? And clarity is when you are concise, precise, active, and vigorous. Okay. So what are examples? Now, we just saw Krista demonstrated some aspects, and what I'm going to do is put it in the context of identifying precisely what these things are. So when I say concise, I mean not to be redundant. So it should be, however, mention the fact that. Now, if you remove that, this is called the it-that construction. If you remove that, it changes nothing in your sentence. And again, we note that the present interpretation of the results can be considered consistent with the model. In fact, that is a shibboleth. It has no meaning. Okay, it has very little meaning, or it has a huge number of sentences to say that that's the interpretation represents the model. Okay, so that's concise versus redundant. And then we have vague versus precise. The samples were withdrawn very often. Very often is vague. Is it once every 5 minutes? Is it once every 2 days? Is it once a year? And it all changes with respect to the context. Incremental improvements in efficiency translate to significant economic benefits. So what do we mean by incremental? What do we mean by improvements? Efficiency, significant, and benefit. So this is a shibboleth with 4 or 5 different words that are vague, are imprecise. Okay, and so the writing is to try to get to the data. So passive versus active, Krista talked a lot about this. A 2-step assumption was proposed to describe the behavior. There's a couple of problems with this, and we're going to look at this as an example later. But who did it? Who made this assumption? What was assumption? What was the behavior? Okay. Then we've got appear to indicate, show close agreement. So these again are words that, in fact, it's a dilexical verb, that you have 2 verbs. In fact, indicate is all you need. Appear is already showing some doubt, and indicate, again, is showing doubt. So here we have redundancy, and it's the lexical. Show close agreement, again, agrees would be fine. And then the straight versus the convoluted is something, if you have a sentence over 30 words, it's probably convoluted. So again, we've got this idea of use and utilize. So utilize, in fact, is from French, and utilization is something that Krista mentioned. But I would go further and say, don't use the word use, it's overused, and I just used it 5 times. So the question is, find a verb, and that verb is press. So when you see the word use, utilize, utilization, usage, those are nouns and verbs that hide a more active verb. So that's what I think is one of the trouble, let's say one of the challenges, is to find those verbs to say what you want to say instead of these helper verbs that really mask what's going on. So here's some examples. Is particularly helpful. How could we replace that? Well, it would be helps. Okay. Then we have several different measurements. Okay. The word different I don't like. Measurements is a noun. Several is imprecise. So how can we do it? 3 measurements. I'm the one that I'm writing. I can be precise. I can tell you how many it was. We don't have to say several different measurements. So again, go to be precise and use quantitative language, and avoid words. I'm giving you another one. Avoid use, avoid different. Represents a possible alternative. Again, we can make that easy. Say is an alternative. How about this one? How would we change very unique? Well, can anything be more than unique? If you are unique, you can't be very unique. So again, be careful with, let's see, adjectives, okay? Extremely similar. Now, if you look it up in the, on the internet, you'll see extremely similar. Well, in fact, is this not an oxymoron? I mean, how can something be extreme and then be similar? Okay. And then can act as a replacement, replaces. So you can see here in writing style, concise versus redundant. Okay. Now we've got, let's see, significant. This is precise. Okay, significant. Nature and science suggest that we reserve the word significant for a statistical descriptor. Okay, a lot, few, some, often, many, very, extremely. So my son Paul says, keep these big guns holstered, meaning only use them when you have defined what it means. So here's a sentence. Cold pyrolysis to acetylene in hydrogen plasma is carried out under ultra high temperature and milliseconds residence. So this is a passive sentence, is carried out. And ultra high temperature, that's vague, milliseconds residence time. So how do we improve this sentence? Well, we tell you what the temperature is, how much time it is, but further, we make it the active voice. Now, this is what's really difficult. Making this the active voice asks you to identify the agent. So what is doing what? So cold pyrolysis to acetylene. Now, that's the subject, but what is the agent? Okay, so here, in fact, the agent is hydrogen plasma. That's what's doing the act. Pyrolyzes coal to acetylene above 1600 Kelvin in 5 milliseconds. So it's hard to identify what the agent is. You know, coal pyrolysis, is that the agent? Well, that's what's getting done. Something's getting done to it. So it's not the agent. Okay, that's the patient. So when we're looking at vigorous and feeble verbs, appear to indicate, we already said that that's indicate. Okay. Experience fragmentation. Again, this is called ionization, verb mutilation. Okay. And Krista mentioned that. And so experience fragmentation is fragment. So you take off the ION, when you look at the ION, then you can see that there's a verb hidden there, lurking there. Make an assessment, assess. So anything with MENT might be a verb lurking underneath. Perform an operation. So this is a common one, but it's really operate. Provide an explanation, explain. Show close agreement, agree. And those, let's say, are some of the rules. Now, maybe not everybody has seen the Calvin and Hobbes comic, but Calvin is a 6-year-old boy, is grade 1 school, and his friend Hobbes is a pet tiger that is very intelligent and is animated. So here we have a text from a journal article, and we're going to go through what it says. It was observed that the mass loss was almost the same, except at high temperature zones where some differences were found. However, these differences seem to be quite small and may be ignored. So first of all, we can get rid of it was observed that, okay? High temperature, that's imprecise. Some differences, again, differences I don't really like. Some is also imprecise. Were found is a passive voice. And seem to be, that's vague, okay? And in fact, this sentence, these two sentences, well, single sentence, quite small as another, is Hobbes comes out and says, the mass loss was the same. So you can see, again, what Crystal was saying, make it simple. But when you make it simple, you can see, all of a sudden realize that all these words were hiding a very simple concept. So if the active voice, again, it goes agent, verb, patient, which is subject, verb, object. Now the passive voice is patient, verb, and then it becomes a feeble verb, agent, okay? So here we go. One of the questions that people have asked Chris is, can we use we? Okay. Can we use we and I? Very few journals allow I. Most journals are allowing we, but Nature and Science, in fact, insist that you use we. And these are the, let's say, what I did was I looked at, in 2013, I looked at the top 500 cited articles in Science and Nature, and I counted how many times they used we or our. And in their abstract, they used it 2,000 times. So we is allowed, and if Nature and Science insisted that people use the word we on the third sentence. The abstract was the first sentence was context, the second sentence was the problem, and the third sentence was admitting what you did. Admit you did it, okay? So we show, we report, we find, they do say we use, okay? So here is, again, a demonstration. It was demonstrated that the hysteresis was greatest in the active reaction zone length. Okay, so this is what I call a 007. It's the passive. It was demonstrated that we can get rid of. It's a 007 because we don't know who did it. So it's called a secret agent. Now, we demonstrated that the hysteresis, okay, what we've done is we've made it active and we've understand that we did it, okay? So this is the active. And I call that the lazy agent because I don't care what you do. That's not important, okay? What's important was that the hysteresis was greatest in the active reaction zone, okay? But we still can improve it. So this is a better agent, okay? The better agent was the hysteresis. But even better than that would be to say hysteresis reached 15% plus or minus 1% in the reaction zone. So it's very precise. We are sharing exactly what is going on. Okay. So here's another demonstration, okay? A two-step assumption was proposed to describe the mechanism of phospholipids adsorption. So the question is, who proposed the mechanism? So again, it's a secret agent, a 007. Now, could we propose an assertive sentence for the above? And this is what I like to insist, is that we go in assertive sentences, okay? And so the first thing you do is you have to find the agent, okay? And in this case, it is a mutilated verb. Now, mutilated verb ends in ION, okay? And let's see, the verb is adsorb. And so, in fact, the phospholipids adsorb in two steps. so you can see that we have was proposed, we've identified phospholipids, adsorb is the verb, and then we've got 2 steps. Okay? Okay. So that's how you can, what we're trying to drive towards is find who is doing what and making that the agent. So I have a little bit of a little, let's see, quiz here or exercise where we try to find how we can improve this. So the first is the HC ratio. Okay, okay, this is not working. So so we've got here the value of the HC ratio, the HC ratio. We're crystals. We're in the form of crystals. We can improve to say we're crystals. Substantially decreased noise. How could you improve that? It would be decreased instrument noise, 24%. Again, substantially is vague. The carbon balance at different reaction times. Okay. The carbon valence versus time. And then we have here, time on stream did not affect the type of coke during reaction. And here we could simplify this to the type of coke was invariant with time. Another set of, let's say, examples. So one has already been reported and in so-and-so. What we can do with that is we can remove this sentence entirely. And if you cite the reference 34, then it's obvious that it's already been reported. Okay. The highest amount of, this is more or less English, where we can say it's the most. Long run analyses suffer also from signal drifting. And then this we can say, rather than suffer, the signal drifts with time. Often requires the development of a dedicated pulse sequence. Often is imprecise. So we just say requires a dedicated pulse sequence. So those are some of our ideas about style. Okay, and now we're going to move on to meta discourse, and in fact, meta discourse is related to style. And meta discourse is about hedging, self-conscious, signposting, periphrasis, boosting, and narcissism. Okay. So here are some examples. Appears to be extremely effective. So appears to be is hedging. Extremely effective is boosting. Okay. Now, if you don't tell us what extremely means, and there's 162,000 appearances of this sentence, this phrase. So the obtained solutions might play an important role in science and engineering fields. Again, might is hedging, important is boosting. Narcissism is, we know the essential role played by the index of refraction in the propagation of the wave. Well, that you know it is unimportant. You probably know it because maybe that's what you're studying. So this sentence we can get rid of entirely because you have not contributed any knowledge. Okay. So although science and nature require we did this, in the rest of the text, to say we did anything is narcissism and probably too much. You don't need that sentence. Self-conscious is when you admit that your work is hard. So it was a very challenging endeavor. Now, why do we, let's say, restrict or recommend that you ignore or not use these sentences is that science is messy and it is very hard. And so again, you're making a reflection on you and how your work is. And in fact, it often hides what the real reality is of what your work is. And we'll give an example. And then signposting is something that we often do. It's great in presentations, but in an article of 5 pages, it's 5 pages. You don't need to signpost. In the following section, we show that as demonstrated in figure 3. For this, we would just use a parenthetical. The article finally concludes. Well, obviously, that's where you look for the conclusions. Comparisons of the results presented above reveals. Again, tell us what the comparison was rather than tell us about where that comparison is. In summary, this paper introduced. Again, extra words for not much contribution and knowledge. So we have hedging. The relative increase in biogas generation could be a result of many factors, and one of them could be due to organic solubilization. So here we have 2 hedges. So when you're hedging so much, you're losing ethos. Your reader's wondering, well, did you do the work? So in fact, organic solubilization generates 10% more biogas. Now, there is some sort of doubt because I put 10%. I didn't put 10% plus or minus 0.1% with a p-value of 0.005. Okay. So hedging verbs: appear, assume, argue, believe, could, would, which are the modal verbs, indicate, suggest. When you see these, question yourself. The non-verbs are almost nearly, apparently, mostly, often. I worked with a chemist and a very technical article, and every page, there was 2 or 3 times he said mostly or often, because he wanted to hedge to make sure everybody knew that this was not always. And that's what Pinker says is the reason this is uninteresting is that science is messy. Your readership is intelligent. Assume they're intelligent. And that assume that because you say something, it's not a legal document. Now, if you were in medicine and pharmacology and you say something, don't hedge, give the data, okay? It's just give the data. So boosting, we saw a little bit about already, slightly, exceedingly, extremely, particularly, very significant, okay? The words in self-conscious are hard, difficult, complicated, controversially, uncertainty regarding interpretation. So here's the sentence. It is hard to predict decomposition due to the extremely fast dynamics of the event. Well, it's not hard. I could say it's 0.3. I just predicted it. That wasn't hard. Okay. What happens with this sentence is it hides what was the problem. The prediction, that's not a problem. Now, was the problem the extent of the reaction? Was it the speed of the reaction? What initiates the reaction? Was it the analytical was insufficient? So when you use self-conscious terms like this, you are really hiding what the problem is. Here is another example from an article. Although lignite is difficult to be gasified in supercritical water, the results indicated that the gasification efficiency, about 47%, was achieved at 30 minutes, 550 Celsius, and 10% KOH. Well, you know, why do we have to say it was difficult? Because you have the data. So at 550 and 10% KOH, 47% of the lignite gasified after 30 minutes. Okay, so we got rid of the self-conscious, we've got rid of indicated, and the word results. Better yet, with supercritical water gasifies 40% of the lignite at 550 with 10%. So here we've identified the agent and made an active sentence. So the narcissism has been attracting attention. Recently, researchers have begun to, okay, these sentences maybe are appropriate in a review, but in an article, they add text and take away from your thesis. What was the problem? What did you accomplish? So we summarize the advantages of cell culture-based vaccines over traditional egg-based technology. Okay. So again, this is, we did something, we summarized. Now, this is a highlight from one of my students that just took the course, and then she translated it to this. The long timelines required to produce egg-based vaccines motivated manufacturers to invest in flexible alternative cell culture-based processes. So on the left, we don't know, and we just knew you did something. On the right, it's rich. So to communicate well, what we say is we've got to look at nouns, verbs, and text. And what we propose is concise, precise, vigorous, active, and straightforward language, okay? We gave examples of each of those, and then we said, okay, well, how about meta-discourse? Well, meta-discourse is related to our style, okay? So boosting is redundant and vague, okay? Hedging is redundant, vague, and feeble. Convoluted is periphrasis. And the narcissism, self-conscious, and signposting is convoluted. It's superfluous. And then we have the it, that construction, which is, again, feeble, passive, and convoluted. So these are the learnings that I'd like you to remain with you. Now, here's an example of an article that we looked at, and we'll just go through it quickly. It should be noted that this is feeble, okay? Already mentioned is redundant. Discussed later in this manuscript is signposting. The possibility exists that it may interact is hedging. And then signposting, we will now move forward with the rest of our discussion. Again, too much text. That's the whole text is periphrasis, okay? What they are saying is materials at the interface interact with the implant or can interact. And that's a bit of a hedge as well. Okay, so now I've told you what I like, what I think is important, and here is a tip of how to go forward with your text, and it's called Writer's Diet. It's writersdiet.com. And so what I do is I have my students write an abstract, and the Writer's Diet will identify verbs, nouns, prepositions, adjectives, adverbs, and the is that construction. And so my student here got a flabby. In fact, he had heart attack on verbs, heart attack on nouns, all heart attack here, and then adjectives, he got fit and trim, and preposition was bad. So the course will take this and then translate that, or at the end of the course, this is something you can expect, that the verbs went from heart attack to lean, prepositions, fit and trim, if that or is lean, fit and trim, and adjectives is lean. Okay, nouns, there's still some work to be done on the nouns because you've got regeneration, deactivation, region. So there's still some work that could be done to this. What I'll do just now is, instead of going over this, I'll just share one more cartoon with you. This is Calvin. He's saying, I used to hate writing assignments, but now I enjoy them. I realized that the purpose of writing is to inflate weak ideas, obscure poor reasoning, and inhibit clarity. With a little practice, writing can be an intimidating and impenetrable fog. Want to see my book report? So this book report, this is a book that I studied in 1967, And from 1950 to 72, everyone in North America studied from this book. And it was like this: look, Jane, look, see Dick, run, Dick, run, see Dick, run. So that's, he's writing a book report on this. And he says, the book is entitled, or the title is The Dynamics of Interbeing and Monological Imperatives in Dick and Jane, a study in psychic transrelational gender modes. Academia, here I come. So this is what we're trying to get away from. This is called a transcendent shibboleth. Okay. So what I want to finish with is the English language has become a casualty of the competition to publish. Okay. Do researchers deliberately write obscurely? Well, they do, but maybe because they don't know. And what we propose is that writing is a learning curve. You know, this is the time invested at the bottom versus the competency. And so the first step is you've got to acknowledge that you can improve, okay? Then you have to decide to improve. Because you acknowledge it doesn't mean you're going to do it. Decide that you want to do something, okay? Next, identify the means. And this is the oldest university in Europe. It's the Bologna. Then the next step is practice. Verify what you're doing, because you know, or you think you know, you really do have to verify. And then you become Shakespeare. But to maintain Shakespeare, you have to practice. So deliberate practice is what you've got to maintain. So deliberate practice means time, okay? And to help you, we wrote a book as well. So communicate science papers, presentations, and posters effectively. Okay, and what was fun was that Elsevier nominated or advertised this book as one of the top 10 research guidebooks every graduate student should own. So in this talk, I had a lot of resources. So Sense of Style with Pinker, Writer's Diet, writing a paper was Whitesides and Kamet, Quintianas, and then these are the images. So that concludes my talk. If you have any comments or questions, or would you like to have a coffee, that's be my guest. You're welcome, Krista. I mean, you really set it up very nicely for me, especially the active voice and the passive voice, because that's a super huge section. We could spend like hours on that, and so you really helped put that for us. Yes. Thank you, Elena. And Ekara, what's her name? Ekaterina. I guess what the conclusion, if I'd like to say, is that I'm going to be giving another presentation in 10 minutes about the difficulty that authors face, okay? So this is how to get better. The next presentation is going to be why writing is like, why the whole publishing process is horrific, okay? And part of what we'll be talking about is just about writing, about how it's not, fulfilling, and it should be. I mean, writing should be the most fulfilling activity that we have together with doing it. And the next presentation will say, like, you know, getting better at writing is practice. And for example, what I say is, I know how to write well, but sometimes I don't. And it's a matter of how well do I have to write to get published? And you know, the 17, you know, do I need 17 revisions? And the answer is no. My colleague Daria, who is Professor Bafita, who is a co-author, she taught me that it's got to be good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now, the question is, what is good enough and what is perfect? And we'll look at that in the next presentation. I don't know.